Oh, sure.
Should I just come with you? Thanks.
Hey, Chris Clifton.
Hi.
I want to apologize for not making it. I have a computer security class I teach at the same time. So, afraid you're not taking it either. But anyway, I hope you enjoy your visit. Sorry, I really wanted to be here for the talk because I think this is a critical topic.
No, I might have a. I'd be happy to send you a slide.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Anyway, I got Brian.
Hey. Oh, thank you. That's very good. Thank you. Hi. You must be Sunil, right? Hi, Sunil. Nice to talk to you. Thank you. It's a good, yeah. It's a So yeah, so you are running the whole machine, right? So I don't know about running, but certainly it's running itself. Yeah.
It's just we're still in the first year.
Okay.
So building and we've already made some changes.
I mean, so you must have seen that as more important than you were running the department.
Yes.
So that means it will be more important thing.
I'm hoping for a big investment.
Hey, Charlie. Good to see you.
So this is my collaborator, Charlie. This is
Hi, Charlie. Hi.
I don't want to interrupt.
I'll talk to you after.
I'm sorry, I had a kind of crazy morning. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that like at some point that's going to change.
Yeah, I know. Good luck with that.
very quiet.
People I know at ours, I know a few people with it. Some people moving around. You know, David, he's environmental engineering. David, why not? But I'm thinking of a person who's, we have trouble with his last name for some reason. I know him so well. David, he's not there anymore. He ended up going to Jersey Tech.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, just a minute. He didn't have family. Yeah, I went to graduate school with him. He was there, David Fritz.
He was six.
Yeah,
He was in W. He was working with biomedical.
right, yeah, he's like a fluid guy, but he's a signal processor too.
Actually, my wife works in a I know some of the people.
Oh, Lena Karam is
Lena
there, I
Karam,
forgot. Yeah. And Punch is there. I
The
forgot.
punch is he's like
Jeffrey Rodriguez is that the person who is there? I have heard that Jeffrey.
Yeah, he doesn't like.
no, Tony Rodriguez. He's a control theory. He's a control theory. There is certainly a control theory. Person.
So thank you so much for coming out. I missed lunch. I promise that I have 6 o'clock lunch. People still like You're so interested in this.
Further ado, let me start with J.B.S. Haldane. Many of you know J.B.S. Haldane. He's a pretty famed biologist. And at one point of time, he said the universe is not only clearer than we suppose, but clearer than we can suppose. Okay. So I'm thinking about it of late, and I think of AI because apparently AI is bigger than you suppose. It's probably bigger than you can suppose. Looking at all the hype around it, AI has been compared to new electricity. It's been compared to fire and electricity. It's been compared to God. Everything uses AI, including smart toothbrush. And then on the other hand, you have all this great stuff about AI killing us all. AI is a bigger threat than North Korea. It is the worst event in the history of civilization. And of course, AI is likely to destroy humans anyway, so this probably is a moot thought and moot problems. But in general, there's a lot of hype, both positive and negative, in artificial intelligence. Some of us who've been working in the area called AI for quite a long time are sort of head scratching as to where the whole situation is. Since, obviously when there is total hype, it's the universities that basically sound the voice of reason. So not surprisingly, MIT decided, what the heck, we'll just start a college for AI, backed by $1 billion. Carnegie Mellon launches an undergraduate degree in AI. China unveils a high school textbook in AI. India is giving a middle school and high school textbooks in AI. And you see where this is going. Clearly, this is all too little, too late. So in SU with my colleagues, I've been working on in utero AI degree. So before your kid comes in, is the list of all these Brahms and Bach cassettes, you need some AI cassettes. Cassettes, by the way, are MP3, whatever, for those of you who know. But anyway, so that's the level at which we have reached. I should not be complaining too much. Because where else do people like me get to have an IMDb page? I don't have a Wikipedia page, but I make it up by an IMDb page. Get to go to White House and then see your beautiful campus. I'm a university geek, and I just love being in a student union connected to the hotel. And so yesterday night I was talking, going around, especially having a lot of fun looking at students who have to actually work on their homeworks, and I really have to work on my talk. Anyway, the agenda that I have in mind for you today is, I want to say a few things about what just happened from my perspective, itself from a personal perspective, and in terms of AI, a way of looking at how things change. It's not so much a history as a particular way of looking at how the quote-unquote data science views and overall holy grail of AI get connected. Okay, and then I basically look at are we done, and then this is basically a bunch of overview of significant thresholds. We need to look at one of the thresholds. There are many thresholds that people talk about. I will talk about two things that I hope you will get. One is this ability to combine tacit and explicit knowledge, and I will talk about it a lot. So I want to foreshadow it up front. Tacit and explicit knowledge has to be combined. we have system 1, system 2 in our brains, and system 1 is essentially extremely good at making fast, tacit decisions. System 2 is the product, is the whole civilization that we came up with, which involves essentially coming up with some causal reasons for the decisions and so on. And it would be very interesting to think of that angle. And then, of course, I also talked about human-AI interaction, which is another big issue which I focus on. So that's my ambitious agenda, and I hope I'll get to at this point. Okay. So let me start with AI. Of course, this is the intro to AI slide that many of you may have seen, that we are interested in designing intelligent agents. Rather than look at that, I find, to understand the way things are going, I find this is more fun to look at. If you think in terms of kids coming into this world, they start showing, many of you were kids at some point of time, they start showing perceptual intelligence. They look at the world, they try to put every possible thing in their mouth. This is one of the kids of my wife's grad students. And I remember this lunch where she was having such great fine motor skills. Everything on the table can be put into her mouth very nicely. We don't have any robots capable of doing it yet. Okay, kids do that, like that's the first thing they do. Then they start showing emotional intelligence. They need to be able to recognize their, at the perception, they need to recognize their mother's face, and then they need to know when to cry, when to smile. Do you really believe that kids, when they come in, know what smiling means, or is it just an involuntary action? That evolution has completely hacked our brains to think that anything that looks like a smile must mean that the kid has decided they are going to be grateful to us. And then emotional intelligence, then they show social and communicative intelligence, the language starts arising, and only later on they start showing cognitive and reasoning intelligence, the kinds of things where you give a word problem, you have to do actual calculations, and then you get a SAT score, SAT score, and so on. Right? That's the way we basically think of intelligence. Now, the last time around, random people in AI were being called to give talks anywhere, is in the 80s. When there was this huge thing about expert systems, rule-based systems for many businesses that will capture what the business is doing, and then wind up using that to automate some of the decisions. 90s, you had reasoning systems, which one of which we thrown Kasparov. Then only very recently, seriously, there's been interest in trying to do perception forever. There's been an area called computer vision. It's now sort of at the danger of becoming a subroutine to ICML. There is an area called speech recognition. Used to be one. It's at it's becoming a subroutine to various machine learning things. And so only recently we started making pretty big progress in perceptual tasks, which is kind of interesting because if you look at the way the kids went, we went in the opposite. The AI, the intellectual discipline went in the opposite direction. And I think it's more than just a minor interesting thing. In fact, this slide, it's kind of a packed slide. I'll try to explain a few of the things, but it explains a lot about what's going on, about the way AI is being viewed currently. Why did AI develop in this reverse way? It's easier to program computers on aspects of tasks for which you have explicit theories. There's a lot in this world for which we have explicit theories. And we will be able to program that, and that's why essentially, in fact, this guy Polanyi used to complain that all of us are mostly focusing on things for which we have explicit knowledge, and we know a lot more that we can't articulate. That's been called the Polanyi's paradox, and Polanyi will show up again a little later. But Polanyi's paradox notwithstanding, that's the part that we understood, and so we could actually have explicit theories, and we'll be writing, programs, essentially AI programs for doing this. We are not particularly so. That's why reasoning and cognitive intelligence was the first things that got looked at in AI. The very first thing that Alan Newell and Hertzheimer were talking about is general problem solver, which is essentially a reasoning system. And then we are not particularly conscious at all of perceptual intelligence. We don't know how we see the world. We do it, but we have no conscious theories. That's why there's an area called computer vision. It tries to make sense of it, but it's basically any hand-coded theories just were completely hamstrung because we really never had a chance of knowing how we see the world or how we manipulate things and so on. And so we have to depend on making machines do those tasks the same way we do. which there is no shortcut. There is no shortcut of me teaching the machine, directly telling the machine how to do. They had to learn the hard way, which is basically it's hang around being cute and all for years on. Some of you are still hanging around in that phase and try to absorb what's going on and try to learn. And that learning is the only way out. And for the longest time, people in vision, etc., wouldn't believe that machine learning is the way to do vision. But that wound up being the only show because to some extent we never really had a chance. We didn't have conscious theories of some of the things that we do. And this tacit knowledge, machine learning is pretty much the only thing to do. Okay? For explicit knowledge, you have a choice. You can let it learn, or you program it, or you teach it, which is basically you have the theory, you can give. Okay? So that is the distinction that you have to keep in mind. And in fact, the fact that the learning is available has nothing really to do with the main reason we are talking about it has nothing to do with AI. It is something to do with World Wide Web. And the fact that people put behavioral traces, pictures, everything all over the web. So, I mean, those of you who know the old computer vision research know that there was this Lena picture, which is this particular Playboy centerfold, whose picture was basically driving computer vision community for the longest time, so much so that she was invited to come to CVPR, and all the researchers were very happy to see the person on whom they were doing research on this file. Now we need to invite 14 million cats and dogs, because that's what ImageNet is, and that's what we have to get, because we have tons and tons of data that's available. And that mindset being important. And the web has become a very interesting way of kind of becoming a sort of a collective unconscious, collective subconscious, like the kind of thing that Carl Jung said. Collective subconscious is basically uploaded, and so it's available if you want to learn. So at least the data is available. Now, why did AI catch public imagination? Now, of course, originally it was a blind and deaf separatist. So, if you have a kid who knows how to play chess but can't smile, can't recognize your face, etc., those kids probably won't get much food, and so evolution, unfortunately, would not be kind to them. And so, in AI too, the fact that you have Deep Blue winning over Kasparov was newsworthy for a couple of days. After that, what do you care? Your life hasn't been affected. Whereas with the perceptual intelligence, essentially your cell phone is able to recognize all the cats in the world, and that's an amazingly advantageous thing. And so you wind up, essentially, people see the uses of AI in their day-to-day life, which also means that they think that they know what are the potential limitations, potential possibilities of AI, which oftentimes they are widely off in terms of what people do. In fact, it's not just people, even researchers are widely off in terms of figuring out what the current technology's limitations are. And then there is also this whole other thing that I want to mention. There is this romance that we have with tacit knowledge and wordless communication. When I was a grad student, we used to end Jack Mink used to end this class with Marvin Minsky's quote that with understanding comes a sense of loss. So if you thought something was intelligent, and then the next thing, of course, I'm not going to go through this. The most big reason why perceptual intelligence has become very big right now is deep learning. I'm assuming everybody here has heard about it. If you're in computer science or any of the STEM disciplines, deep learning is a big reason. It's a technology that all of you know has existed in multiple forms for quite a long time. The thing that really changed is not the theory; it is the world. The world essentially, there was always data, but we were not capturing it. Web allowed us to capture it, cell phones allowed us to capture it. And the fact that much of the technology of neural networks existed, in fact, the stuff that's working extremely well, starting 2012, has existed since 80s. And yet what was missing was the data. And we just did not know that extra amount of data will wind up actually getting reasonable performance of these virtual networks. So that's worthwhile keeping in mind. And then I want to just quickly walk you through, obviously, the stuff that most of you already know. In terms of perceptual intelligence alone, part of the reason which probably got you to any AI talk these days, you have heard that you can caption images, which is something that you don't quite know how you do it, and so you're very impressed that machines can do it. Even if they are highly cherry-picked examples, it's still quite impressive that there is something to cherry-pick to begin with. You can generate faces. So essentially, you're capturing a high-dimensional distribution reasonably well enough that you're able to sample points from the learned distribution. That's pretty impressive. Okay, we were not able to do this before. You can, of course, do the same thing with language. GPT-2 that you have heard of can essentially take a prompt and write something that passes for a high school essay. I know, I understand that's a somewhat lower threshold, but it's still pretty impressive. We didn't expect it to be possible. And then, of course, much of this, notice that all of these are really mostly about tacit knowledge and perception, the stuff that we don't quite know. We can't give anybody a recipe as to how to do it. And then, of course, there's been some interesting work in combining perception and action. In AlphaGo is something that people have talked about. It's actually an interesting contrast to compare AlphaGo and Deep Blue. Deep Blue was essentially starting with knowledge and basically focused on research. AlphaGo used search, but it also tried to learn some of the features. Depending on how much you read into the paper, there are some hand-coded features, but there's also a reasonable amount of machine learning going on there. Right? So that's some of the things. So this has led to obviously lots of exuberance. They're very impressed with AI. Everybody is. And in fact, I was just telling somebody that last week we had a visit day for the grad students, PhD students. And in the past, I used to go and ask, is anybody interested in AI? Now this year I asked, is anybody not interested in AI? Because that's a much more informative question. And it turns out there's only one person who was not interested in AI. So there is a significant relation of exuberance. This guy, as you know, Archimedes said, if you give me a lever and a place to stand, I can move the world. Then the old version of that is 5th generation project in 1980s. If you give me enough of these machines, I'll be able to beat Japanese in their game, because Japan was the boogeyman in those days. China was not that much of a boogeyman. Now, of course, give me big enough GPU, large enough data set, and deep enough network. I'll create super intelligence and maybe even beat China. Okay, that's our new worry. And this has become so crazy that essentially everything that works is associated just with deep learning. Even if in fact the people who did it say that's just not deep learning. So this is an IEEE spectrum quote about how AlphaGo worked, which is reinforcement learning, and you notice they say reinforced learning, but it's really another word for deep learning. And this is IEEE spectrum. It's not New York Post. Just keep that in mind. So we are just as clearly disheartened by the technology that's working. And then, of course, that's the research side. The exuberance in the industry side is something else to behold. That's the number of companies that used to mention AI in their earnings reports. And you notice that by 60, it started going exponentially large. And if I actually write it now, it's out of this building, because every company has to have AI. Every possible company has to have AI. So if you are doing any AI courses, you can send your resume anywhere. They will say that they have AI involved. And that's kind of the thing. And so much so that, actually, I don't know how many of you noticed that it's been shown that 40% of the AI startups in Europe don't involve any kind of AI. So it doesn't even matter if you didn't take an AI course. Just say you are an AI person and you get to know what you're doing. And I'm sure I have huge number of colleagues who used to snicker at me, saying I'm an AI, poor AI guy. How can you not do something more interesting like software engineering? And now they all tell me, we have been in AI forever. Apparently I didn't notice it. Right? So AI is, as I said, AI, remember that Haldan code, in Javier Haldan code. It's like curiouser than you can imagine right now. You sit in the middle. And anecdotal evidence suggests that in many cases, industry is like desperate to find applications for deep learning, even if they don't actually need it. Right? So you have all heard of from data to knowledge. That's old news. The new news is from knowledge to data, so that data can then be processed by deep learning algorithms. Okay, and I'm not kidding. Lots of people, lots of companies which have standard operating procedures that they actually can give to, that they're ready to give, they say, no, that would not be considered AI. Wall Street is not going to give money if you do that. I have to use deep learning, and so in which case I'll convert whatever I know into data, and then so that basically deep learning will then find patterns, which is as crazy as it gets. And this is the distinction between tacit and explicit knowledge. Why should you convert your explicit knowledge into tacit just so that you can use some technology? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so this is all sorts of great examples of this thing. This is my favorite one. India has decided the most obvious tacit knowledge in the world is dating, and so they decided that marriage can be decided now by AI algorithms. So they would be much more robust than the marriages made in heaven because these are AI algorithms. Anyway, so that's sort of what is happening now. And the next question I want to ask is, are we done? And this place I want to talk a little about some significant thresholds. So the two of which I want to talk about is one is about this tacit explicit knowledge distinction. The other that I'll focus on is my own work on human AI interaction. There are other ones that I mentioned, but I won't go into details. Okay, so these are the thresholds. They're all quite important. So one, as I mentioned, is combining tacit and explicit knowledge. The other is common sense. In fact, you cannot give a talk about AI limitations without using the word common sense. So I will use that. And everybody needs an example for common sense. Mine is this. It's late in the afternoon. And we give you an example. It's a pop quiz, unless you checked out on the Google already. Explorer went around the world. Explorer Magellan went around the world 3 times. And one of the trips he died. Question. Which trip did he die? You have until the end of the class to figure it out. But anyway, so that's the kind of thing that we mean by common sense. Okay, common sense is this glue that connects incomplete specifications in the right way, in a reasonable way, because we share this knowledge background. Okay, and that's very important. Incompleteness is important. Sample efficient learning is very important. People do talk about that. Deep learning tends to take humongous amounts of examples. Human learning doesn't require those many examples. At least as a teacher, I hate it when my students say, you haven't given us any examples. One is plenty, and you're supposed to figure it out best. And I'm hoping that you're better than deep networks. I'm not going to give you 80,000 examples of one concept such that you will know it. Right? So we hope that, at least teachers hope that. And then, so the two I want to focus on is combining tacit and explicit knowledge and the interaction with humans. Okay? And this one a couple of minutes, and this one will not. Okay, so let me, in terms of the tacit explicit knowledge, let me say a few things that are obvious to people in the area, but may be surprising to some other people. So some unintuitive aspects of deep learning. First of all, we are in the look my it works era of deep learning. Okay, we're just very happy that things work. It's a beautiful time to be in because one more thing works. We have no idea why it works, but it works. Okay. Actually, if you heard very good talks, I think Ian Goodfellow gave a very nice talk at AAI this year. And he's a very nice guy, very careful, balanced guy. And the number of times during his talk, he says, we think this is happening because, we believe this is happening because, it's just huge. Because most of the time, we have no real idea why anything is actually working. And so we take pleasure when it works, but when you don't know why it works, it can fail for completely strange reasons, some of which you already know, and I'll give you some examples of. Okay, the state of the art, the other thing that's what is ensuring, in some sense, this is connected to the old overfitting that everybody with any statistics background knows, which is to understand that state of the networks have more parameters than data. We talk about big data. It's big parameter era that we are in. Okay, so GPT-2 has 1.5 billion network weights, 1.5 billion network weights, and it trains itself on 800 million documents. I'm assuming you're engineers, you know which number is bigger, right? So normally this is statistician's nightmare, right? You don't put too many weights because that's the classic way to get overfitting. And for those of you who have heard of overfitting, one or two of you, so if you have these green dots, I can fit a straight line, which is just 2 parameters in two dimensions, or I can fit an 800-degree polynomial. And the 800-degree polynomial will be extremely good in agreeing with the training data. It might agree with me in a few other things, but I have no clue what it's doing in the other regions. And if in all these regions, basically you have no clue as to how bad its predictions can be. And I would argue that much of what is happening in adversarial examples that you have heard of, that I'll show you a couple of them, are connected to this. Because there's huge overfitting going on, and you are happy when the examples work in your favor, but you should have known beforehand that this is to be expected. Okay, so it should be recipe for overfitting. We tend to see papers and people talking about the fact that, well, looks, it's supposed to be overfitting, but notice it doesn't. But notice it doesn't actually misses the point that there's an entire cottage industry of adversarial examples for everything. Okay, that we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, that's that one. You have seen this. Everybody has seen this picture, many of you. So you have your school bus. I add some noise. I get a new school bus, which you see is an ostrich, right? Basically, this is a classic example. There are several examples. So this, the state-of-the-art networks will see this as an ostrich, this as a school bus. It's more interestingly, they're more sure that this is an ostrich. They're like 98% sure this is an ostrich. There may be about 80% sure this is a school bus. Okay? And similarly, there is a puppy, some noise, and of course a fraction of the noise added, and then you get another ostrich. Okay? So it's possible, unbeknownst to you, the world is full of ostriches. You just didn't notice. Okay? Let's also not forget the fact that perception, human perception, also has fibers. How many of you have seen this picture? Great, okay. Somebody at least keeps track of things going outside the world, outside his computer science walls. So this is a picture that was making rounds in Norway in social media. They apparently have social media in Norway too. And so basically, some right-wing lunatics put this picture on the Facebook and said, "Oh my God, Norway is being overtaken by burqa-clad Muslim women. They're all over our city buses, and we need to stop this. Obviously, we need to build a fjord or a wall or something." But that was their work, right? Now you see this, and I hope most of you realize. You might feel sorry for the bigoted narrow-mindedness of those bozos, but I hope you realize that you can almost see why they misconceived this picture, which is a vanilla city bus seat, to be a burqa-clad woman. You may not have made that mistake, but once I said, "Oh, that's why I thought," you can understand that. Now, I told you this is an ostrich. You now see why it's an ostrich? Now, here I told you this is a city bus seat, you agree, even if you thought it was a burqa-clad woman. Now I'm telling you this is an ostrich. Now do you see? Clearly not, right? I hope not, unless you are really ostrich oriented. So the point is, the failure modes are not just simple failure modes, they're completely disconnected with anything that you have any intuition about. Okay? And if that is the case, so that's what is happening. Basically, it's been overfitted enough that, of course, these are not naturally occurring city buses or school buses. These were adversarially changed. But the fact that they can be adversarially changed and that there are many, many ways they can be adversarially changed tells us something about the technology that we are using. And it's an important issue to keep in mind. This was a very recent paper, actually. It's being presented in iClear. It's an amazing, this is as good an example of the end of this kind of adversarial example you can get. See here, you see all these pictures, they're all completely different categories, as you can see. And they point out that essentially they are manufactured in such a way that the logics at the last level are the same. So because of which, for all these completely different pictures, top 1 to 1,000 ranks are exactly the same class, same exact class. Okay? So that's why it's kind of, now why is it interesting? So there is this old story, and some of you may have heard of the fact that sometimes you can wind up misconstruing correlation to be semantic. So every time you saw somebody wearing a suit, they wound up being smart, let's say, especially if you're hanging around in Oxford or Cambridge, all the professors are forced to wear suits, and so you think, yeah, anybody who is in suit is smart. That's a theory that works very well in Oxford, at least until Michael Woolridge showed up when he doesn't wear coats. But certainly it doesn't work, I hope, in Purdue, because I don't see any suits here. And I'm told it's a great college, right? And the point is that it made sense in that distribution, and it was a correlated variable which had nothing to do with the semantic part that we're looking at, which is the intelligence. And yet it worked fine as a discriminative learner. And the interesting thing is when the networks are learning their own representations for which you have no actual intuition, this can happen in lots and lots of different ways. And the fact that we don't have a complete theory for vision is not equivalent to saying we don't have any theory for vision. We don't know how to clearly specify a dog, but we certainly know that that school bus was not an ostrich. There are many, many different semantic reasons why the school bus is not an aspect. And it's very important, and within a discriminatory learning framework, it is actually possible to find if those particular features are discriminating enough among the classes, it's enough. And it's surprising that it's possible, but you are talking about very high dimensional inputs. And so this started, I will say an example. So of course, because of this is become a nice cottage industry in the background. So every day you break something else, there is a cyber security. Now cyber security has become taken backseat to AI security because AI can help cyber security, but AI can start huge number of additional problems. So this one, for example, a couple of days back, I showed that Tesla car that you apparently many of you are able to buy one and you put it on autopilot, it can essentially completely misunderstand lane markers and can go into the auto oncoming. Okay, so now you can imagine that everybody will play by the rules and nobody will hack anything. This is what we imagined when we started computers, and then the whole area of cybersecurity started. Like I tend to think that desktop engineering solves the problems that are existing in the world. Computer scientists create problems first, and then solve them. So we never go out of jobs because they're always making new problems. The latest is, of course, the AI-related problems. So Jeff Hinton, when this whole thing came up, some of the people thought, oh, this is just a boutique thing. It's going to go away. It's like I'm sure some junior found some adversarial example. This is not going to be here too long. But honestly, it's a deeper problem. And I actually tried to explain to you that there's enough reasons for it to be a deeper problem because there's humongous, just from the data, there is not enough constraint for you to make sure that there is any connection between what you think are semantic features and what the machine is learning. What part of the machine learns its own representations don't you understand when you say it's not interpretable? Okay. So anyway, so Jeff also, for many people basically now think it's a much bigger problem than just something that good for writing papers. It's always very good for writing papers. So now I want to end this part by essentially bringing back Polanyi and the data versus doctrine tension that AI is going through right now. I mentioned to you that there is this cottage industry of converting knowledge into data just so that deep learners can use it. Okay, you should never do that. There should be a better way. If you actually have knowledge about the domain, you should be able to use it, and you should be able to have techniques that combine both learned knowledge and explicitly given knowledge. And the fact that we don't know how to do it now tells us that there is a huge research area there. As again, as we should just convert everything into examples and hope for the best. That just makes no sense to me. So recent advances sort of have made AI synonymous with learning from massive amounts of data. That's why AI is not data science, but it's sort of in popular imagination has become data science. Because the first question when people ask when you say you're doing AI is what data do you use? Okay, as if that's really ultimately the clear point of it. Data is extremely important, especially for tacit decisions, are improving our theories. But it makes no sense for us to take hard knowledge that might be available in various areas and convert it into basically data, right? And just so that you can get that. So one of the hallmarks of human intelligence is the seamless interplay of tacit and explicit knowledge, and that's something that we should be working toward and not just give up on. So for example, there are some companies are doing the reasonable things. So for example, this is Stromberg et al. There are many perceptual intelligence problems. There are also a huge amount of know-how in the company. So their AI division winds up combining both. Currently ad hoc, not necessarily, they don't have any papers, but they have to combine, as again as saying, let me just hang around and see huge number of examples so that I can relearn what you're about to tell me. It's not worth doing that. Jeff, you can make a nice theoretical argument that, look, in the end, maybe machines will come to a point where they learn their own representations, but they'll also learn how to communicate with us, and so then it will be like us talking to each other and developing common representations. How long it took for us to develop common representations? And it's not going to be that easy. And why would we want to develop a feature where the machines are doing crazy stuff and we have no actual connection to the interpretability of what they're doing? And that's a useful thing to keep in mind. And this is what I already made. So again, there's multiple ramifications of this Polanyi's revenge, including the interpretability part of it. Everybody says machine learners cannot be interpreted. That's bozoness. If you have hand-coded features, you can completely interpret it. right? For example, if I told you I figured out the theory behind intelligence, if the person is wearing a suit, he is intelligent or she is intelligent, you will laugh at it. I hope you will laugh at it, right? Because there actually it's completely interpretable. You can tell where I went wrong. But if on the other hand, the same suitness has been converted, the fact that somebody is wearing suit has been converted into some sort of a complex feature that is being computed approximately over a nice 150 layer neural network, you have no idea that it's actually fixating on the suit. And that's where the actual interpretability problem comes. Now the solution to the interpretability problem currently is to show regions of the image that is making it a something or other. That is a very stopgap solution. Can you show me in the example that I showed you earlier about the ostrich one, can you show me which part of the school bus makes it an ostrich? Can any machine show it? And if you were to show a couple of dots in a couple of pixels, does that constitute an explanation of any kind? To some extent, interpretability problem is supposed to be hard when you don't have common vocabulary. And furthermore, point-like explanations won't work except for images. Even if for images they don't work, but for more than images they don't even work because you have to point over a space-time tube. Now, why did you wear this shirt? The answer to this is space-time tube of things that happen to you. That's how I have to explain. And that's much harder to do. The whole point of system 2 development is to essentially be able to provide compact explanations for what system 1 is doing, even if they are not completely right. And that's something that we keep in mind. Susceptibility to the adversarial attacks, I've told you a lot of that can happen. And of course, susceptibility to data set bias. This is what the whole worry about societal bias, etc. It's not at all surprising that if you are trying to figure out, you're having a meeting here this evening, right after my talk, and all the Purdue professors, Purdue engineering professors are going to come, and you decided to figure out how many male jackets should we get, how many female jackets should you get, the data can answer predictively. Because you go to Google and say Purdue professor, they show a huge number of balding males, and you know that you need a lot of those. But if you use the same data to figure out how to build this university into 25 years into the future, you're being silly. Because society is going to evolve based on our decisions, and it's clearly going to be only dependent on the data currently that is there. And the idea of diversifying the data is not going to help. Because if you put some fake female faces and say they are also professors just so that it's diverse, you didn't change anything. You just changed the data to the. So to some extent, to avoid the bias in the data, we need to be having a better society. It's so much simpler to actually do like a band-aid than be in a better society. So we all have nice, conferences talking about stopping bias in AI. But AI is not going to, unless AI algorithm is written by brain-dead people, which I hope PhD students are not, it should not be making biased decisions. The biases will be coming from the data, and it's not very clear how to start. Okay, there are a few things you can do, such as don't just assume that if you want to talk about engineering professors worldwide, don't just look at Purdue engineering professors. That is obvious. But beyond that, there are many other things you can't actually do any better. And then there's a huge number of examples, about this bias that came up. This is a very beautiful thing. In China, somebody wrote a paper to CVPR. Thankfully, it wasn't accepted, where they showed that if they train a convolutional neural network on the mugshots of people who have either already been jailed because they've been convicted of a felony, or people who haven't yet been jailed because they have been caught. Okay, these are supposed to be good guys. And ComNet was able to predict with 98 or 95.4% certainty on the held out data set whether or not this person this mugshot belongs to a criminal. So in China, obviously, I won't be a criminal because I don't look like any of these guys, but somewhere else I would look. But the point, of course, is that this is the kind of thing that we are drunk on. We are essentially looking for tacit knowledge for everything, So I have, and then of course, that's not just China. This is Israel basically trying to tell you whether you are high IQ, extrovert, or whether you are a brand promoter, or whether you're an academic researcher, whether you're high IQ. It's all in your face. It's a modern phrenology, modern palmistry, except it's called, database decision making. And so I decided as a professor, the thing that really is a problem for me is grading. Right? I mean, I talk like this anytime I can talk, and people can listen to me if they want. but it's a grading. And so I have basically came up with this new AI-based grading scheme where I trained based on my data of the students from past years and the grades that I decided to give them. And when you join my course, I just terminate, actually can give you the grade even before the course starts. It's a very efficient system. Okay, keep this in mind when you fall for the system. So now this is easy to laugh at. Think of what is happening when there is a new news every day saying that machines are better at interpreting X-rays for all kinds of diseases. Okay, in what sense are you actually at all guaranteed, other than the fact that somehow on the held out data set it's done well? All of these guys have done well on the held out data set, and yet you laugh at it. And here you laugh at it because you have a theory, you have a partial theory. You don't think grades are caused by face. In X-rays, you have no theory. In fact, the doctors are dependent on us because they don't know what they have to look for. And so you tell them something, they trust you. That's a huge issue that we need to be careful about. Okay, that's what we're keeping in mind. So this is my data science robot prayer. So there's a serenity prayer, right? Which says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. For robots, the AI agents, the version is human, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot learn. There's nothing shameful about taking knowledge if people are trying to give you. And data to learn the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay, and so what was to okay, so that's about that part. For the second part that I want to go in the next few minutes is an idea of the kind of work that we work on, which is interaction with humans, AI and AI systems working with humans. So how do we get them to? Of all the news items on AI, the kind of things that catch my attention are the kinds like this. So AI systems helping old ladies cross the street and playing with kids, cooking food, hanging around, sans drama, right? The reason you haven't seen this is because it's fake news. Because nobody writes these kinds of articles. Because mostly AI had a curious ambivalence to humans. Okay? Our systems, AI systems, work and happiest when they are either far away from the humans, preferably on Mars, where there is at least a radio delay of even seeing anybody, or when we are creaming humans. Okay, so there's the chess, there is the poker, there is the AlphaGo, there is Dota, anything. We're extremely good at working on adversarial problems between man and humans and machines. And we're surprised that world at large is a little worried about AI. I mean, if everything that we are doing is adversarial stance, why are you expecting that people should think that AI is going to be, oh yeah, tomorrow onwards will be very friendly to you. They are just going to talk about their Dota. That doesn't make much sense. So old enough people might remember this guy called John Lennon, who wrote this song called "You Want to Help Humanity." It's the people that you just can't stand. And I think AI also had this bit of this. We like to automate intelligence, but it's the humans we couldn't stand. And to some extent, the worries for having humans in the loop have been that in the beginning at least, AI systems were not powerful enough that if you bring humans, that's the way you cheat. Many of you know mechanical Turk. This is the original mechanical Turk. This is a real mechanical Turk. You see a little Turk here? So that guy essentially was the brains of the machine. And so they will say we have built a new artificial intelligence machine for that era. They didn't have the word AI, but something else. And but then it was being this thing. And of course, if you don't recognize this, you recognize this. Sophia, the new mechanical Turk. And if you ever find yourself being impressed by Sophia as an AI person, please reconsider your AI chops. Okay, because essentially it's a prestidigitation. And we fall for cartoons, but you don't believe that cartoon agents are actually doing everything by themselves. It's Disney doing it. For Sophia, there is handsome robotics doing it. And it's worthwhile keeping in mind. But so there is this worry about cheating that people are worried about, but they have changed, and the systems are powerful enough that now we can start thinking of humans not as crutches, but as ways in which the problem becomes broader. In fact, working on human working in collaboration with humans is harder than just working for the AI agent to work by itself. Okay, so it actually makes the problem harder. And so last year when I got to give a presidential address at AAA, I talked about challenges of human-aware AI systems, talking specifically about why is it this human-aware AI all over the place already, why should we pursue it, and the research challenges and the long-term issues. And I'll give like a 15-minute summary of it here, the newer version of it, and then hopefully you can ask me questions or look up other papers afterwards. I want to mention that human-aware AI in general is going to broaden the scope of AI. So there is this evolutionary theory that says that we have the brains that we have not to run away from the lions and tigers, but to deal with each other. There was no real reason why we needed this big brain. There are not good explanations for that. And in fact, one reasonable explanation is that we needed it for social interactions. Okay? And in fact, I don't know how many of you know Sally-Ann test. Sally-Ann test is this little test where Sally comes into the room, puts a ball in this yellow box, goes out of the room. Then Ann comes in, takes the box from the yellow box, puts in the gray box. Now Sally comes in, and I'm asking you this question. Where do you think Sally will look for the ball? Those of you who are still working on the Magellan problem, you have a question. Okay. But for the rest of you, it's a silly question. What's interesting about it is until about 3 years, kids can't answer this. They can speak, but they tend to assume that if they know something, the world knows that. So until around 3 years age, many kids will say that Sally will look for the ball in the gray box because they have seen that the ball is in the gray box, and they see it in the gray box, then everybody else, so Sally should know it too. So they don't have a model of Sally's mind. There is no mental model. If you don't have it, and one way it's a beautiful word, nobody can lie. What's the point in lying if everybody knows exactly what happened? But on the other hand, it will be a very less interesting word. Because if you are unable to actually model mental states of other people, then you can't cooperate, you can't do anything, adversarial, but you can't also cooperate. Okay? And so in fact, I say this half jokingly that as a parent, I mean for AI people, having kids is like having experiments in progress. So I was very, very happy when my son told his first lie. Because then I knew he has a brain. Okay, and to me the point is ability to model others is actually a harder problem than just living yourself in an animated manner. So that's why it's interesting. It's required in lots of places, of course, in intelligent tutoring systems, social robotics. Those have been around, but there are other things such as human-aware personal assistants. Any assistant which is actually working with you should have an idea of your mental model. There is a significant amount of interest in all the federal agencies in getting AI systems to collaborate in a meaningful way with humans, and that's action. So if you look at this old picture of AI agent architecture, the moment you put in human, what parts change? Every part changes. In essence, it becomes essentially a multi-agent system where you are keeping track of effect of your actions on other people's mental states. And that winds up being very important. So it's a much harder problem. And what I've been doing in my group is been looking at some of these challenges, especially with a focus on planning and decision making, making course of action. And we look at two kinds of scenarios. One is human-robot interaction. So basically there is in this particular case, there's a commander who is sort of remotely situated, and this robot essentially is in a sort of a toy-style simulation of an urban search and rescue scenario. And what happens in this particular case is the models, they may have started with the same models of the world, but they diverge because the robot actually is sensing things that are going on in the world. It finds that certain directions are closed, certain directions are open, and so what the human would expect would be the shortest model for the robot may not be the shortest path for the robot. In that case, it can do one of two things. It can either do what it did in the first part of the video, where clear the rubble from the path that is blocked, just so that the human would not be surprised. This is being explicable. You're trying to essentially do a behavior that is expected by the human in the group. The other alternative is to do what you want to do, but actually provide explanations. The explanations, and I'll hopefully show a few points about that. In the case of that, it's providing explanation at top, which is the minimal difference in the models that it has and the human has, that will have allowed the human to realize that what it's doing is actually the optimal action. This is how you explain to people why you have done a certain decision. You basically get their model minimally changed. Of course, there's a vacuous solution, which is say, well, why did you do this? Take my brain, you would have done the same thing. That would be essentially throwing the entire model as an explanation. But normally explanations have to be shorter and to the point, and that is what we'll focus on. And then, the other case that we look at is decision support systems. There is no embodied robot, but essentially somebody is doing mission plans on this particular computer interface, and the computer has a planner behind the back end, and it's suggesting additions, how to extend the plans and so on. And the way it does it, it has to have a sense of what plan the human was trying to construct, so that the suggestions it's making are in line with what the human is trying to do, rather than just being complete non-sequiturs. Okay, so those are the kinds of things we wind up doing. I am basically going to rush through the next several slides to actually end on time. But so from the point of view of the technology, we essentially want to deal with not just the model of the robot, but the model of the human, the model. So essentially, planning becomes harder because you're no longer just deciding best course of action based on your model of the world, but you're also considering simultaneously other people's model of you at the same time. Okay, and that's so the teaming requires both modeling the human and the kinds of things that we do there. For example, in terms of modeling the human, in terms of recognizing people's goals, some cases people might tell you what their goals are, but you can also actually do intentional recognition either by language, which we don't do. In this example, we are actually doing it using brain-computer interfaces. Very cheap, not neural link level, but cheap brain-computer interfaces. And so that sort of allows, so this guy is happy there because the robot essentially realized that he wanted to use one of those blocks, and it avoided touching it, and it completed its task without conflicting with what the human wanted to do. So that's the one kind of thing. In the terms of the other thing is, if you are in a team, you can't just do what you want. You have to foreshadow what you are doing. And I try to do this today. I'm giving the talk. Half of the time I spend saying, I'm going to next tell you this. I'm going to next tell you this, rather than just go first slide to end slide. Of course, it made me delayed, but on the other hand, hopefully you got a few points at least, right? And the idea there is a robot has to project its intentions, where it is trying to go. And again, you can do it with natural modes of communication, such as language. In this particular case, we are looking at things like HoloLens and augmented reality. So using the HoloLens, that robot can actually show this. These are the pieces that I want to be focusing on, so that we won't get into problem. So anyway, these guys went imagine top and got some prizes. The other thing of the explanation, I want to show you that bigger video that I mentioned earlier, which is essentially this notion of explicability and explanation. In one case, the robot essentially tries to remove the obstacle in the path with rubble, just so that its behavior would be what is expected by the human. In the other case, the second part of this video, it actually decides to take the cheap path, the shorter path, and then tell the human, this is the reason I have to take the short path. And the explanation then becomes a reconciliation of its model to that of the and I will skip over these details. Actually, the explicability, the idea of doing things that people expect you to do, is part of a bigger spectrum of notions of interpretable behavior. Just as we're talking about interpretable machine learning, you can talk about interpretable robot behavior, and we have a paper coming out that talks about the landscape of interpretable behaviors and how they're connected to each other in terms of computing. In terms of explanations, essentially, we view them, I showed you that slide already, we view them as this model reconciliation, talking about the deltas between your model and the AI agent's model and the human's model. And XAI is hard. People talk about explainability in AI all the time. But I basically want to, I already told you that pointing is the poor man's way of explaining things. You actually provide the minimal differences between our world models that would have made you get to the same decision as I have. And there are significant psychological validities to this kind of explanations. I'm going to skip over this. I want to show that the way explanations are computed winds up involving a significant meta search. It basically, the robot essentially has to think in terms of the space of models and figure out what's the minimum changes made to the human would get them to the same plan that you should have done. It's actually a hard problem. So providing good explanations is not supposed to be easy. Otherwise, teachers should not be paid, right? So then there is, and then of course you can do sorts of computational tricks on that. It turns out that explanations and explicability can be combined, so you can essentially get the human's model halfway to you, and then behave conformantly with respect to that. That's the way of combining explicability and explanation. There is learning here. I didn't mention too much of it, but the way the learning is figuring out the human models. In some cases, you start with the same model and you only need to think of how they diverged, such as in that map following. In other cases, you have to learn them from the traces. And one of the things that we talked about is this idea that oftentimes in different parts of AI tended to be very causal oriented, very causal theory oriented versus very correlational theory oriented. Planning has been one that's been completely dependent on causal theories, and we have actually advocated, for example, doing more shallow theories which involve both half causal, half correlational information, and using some of the techniques from deep learning, essentially like word vectors and embeddings and so on, and show that they too actually can improve the models learn. The other thing, of course, is you can actually do, this is sort of, at some level, this is reinforcement learning involved with two agents. And I don't necessarily have to build your model. I can actually learn your policy. What would you do? And then I have a simulator for you. And that would be a model-free model reconciliation. There's a paper that is under review right now about that, and that's that. From that, actually, there's a huge cottage industry of extensions that you can do that I won't go into, including dealing with multiple human agents, dealing with models that are at different levels of abstraction, and also figuring out how to and when to project. Intentions. And you can do these kinds of things where the same interface winds up giving both public explanations and private explanations tailored to individuals which are interacting. Now, I talked about humans, and I said this is the kind of thing that works with humans. And you might say, how do you know? And I say, I'm a human. And my worry is, of course, the usual thing is that engineers saying they are stand-ins for humans is a bit of an oxymoron. And so you actually need to do real human subject studies. And so I work with a human factors person, Nancy Cook, and then do this basically human studies. The work that I've shown, we have IRB, Institutional Review Board things, and we showed, for example, we have done experiments showing with human subjects, showing that the kinds of explanations people seem to exchange are similar to the kinds of explanations they're computing, and that when you do explicable behavior, the need for explanation. So we are sort of showing rather than say it's self-evident. And finally, this actually opens an entirely new can of worms. If people can model your mental state, if an AI agent can model your mental state, it can tell lies to you too. And there's this whole issue of the trust in autonomy. Would people and AI, when will they trust AI machines, right? And so that's a longer term phenomenon, but at least explicability and ability to provide right kinds of explanations improves trust. It can also be misused. In fact, the way you can misuse is you can have a whole bunch of ethical quandaries. The last movie reference, how many of you have seen The Sting? Okay, the rest of you please see it. It's probably one of the best movies in the world. And if you see Sting, and since so many of you haven't seen, I don't want to give it away. But the whole point is essentially you manipulate other people's mental models, and so that you can essentially get what you want out of them. And I'm not saying that, I'm not being Nick Bostrom and saying AI agents are going to do this out of their own volition, but your friends who don't like you can make your AI agent do that to you. And this is a new kind of longitudinal adversarial attacks. You can actually argue that what happened in Facebook's little bubble is, in some sense, an ignorant way of doing this. In essence, Facebook knew that people should not be encouraged into staying in their bubbles of flat earthness. And yet, their review model clearly said the more of flat earth things you show them, the more they're going to click and the more advertisements you will see. So in some sense, it didn't lie deliberately, but it essentially gave you bad interaction between an AI system and a human. And this can be done in one-on-one fashion too. So in fact, we showed in the last District AI this year that the same kind of technology can be used both to cooperate and obfuscate. So you open the Pandora's box of mental modeling. You can use it for cooperation as well as obfuscation, but there is no other way around it. And so we also wrote a paper on when can AI bots lie, because when you're giving an explanation doesn't have to be rooted with respect to what you believe is the state of the world. You can decide to give an explanation with respect to a different model that you know is patently false. I would argue that's what Mark Zuckerberg knew, that people staying in filter bubbles can't be good. But it's much nicer to just provide that explanation. So you can get that, and that's lying. And so you can actually do lying with respect to this. And so now AI can be as smart as my son. And so, of course, when we do this, should AI bots lie, people will start thinking about Skynet. But at least this is not a Skynet with guns. This is more interesting, evolved Skynet, which is trying to manipulate you. That's sort of an interesting direction. So I sort of, on the human AI part, it seemed to be, I obviously went very fast, but more importantly, it seemed to be that instead of making the AI problem easier, I made it harder by putting humans in the loop. And so why should we bother? So this Kurt Vonnegut Jr. said, if only it weren't for the people, the current people, the world would be such a great place. We're all engineers, and it's the last thing we want is humans. But then some of our best friends, including ourselves, are human. And so why build a future where we will be in this matrix la la land? We should be starting from scratch in terms of AI systems working, collaborating with humans. That's where I'll end. So in summary, what I tried to say in different, probably more emphasis in some parts than I expected, but having made progress on declarative tasks, AI systems, explicit knowledge tasks, AI systems have recently found significant success in learning tacit knowledge from data. Okay, which is good. But this has also had many interesting ramifications, both within and outside the field. I went through a bunch of the exuberance that I talked about. We're still far from, of course, general intelligence, and many thresholds are there. The two things that I mentioned that I hope you remember, in addition to the obvious, appropriate common sense and low samples, is combining tacit and explicit knowledge, and also human AI interaction. And then AI remains a potent tool as a weapon. And of course, that's the part that I sort of talked about in the middle, much of the societal biases, etc. And the fact that you can create new reality. People used to say that perception is reality. If you can do perception, then perception can also be fake reality. So you can create videos where Obama says anything you want. There already exist videos where Trump says anything he wants. And lots of these kinds of things can happen, and you will wind up getting into tricky situations where we used to assume that show me so that I can believe. The show me state is old news. Show me anybody can do, that's not true anymore. That's what AI is when the perception has been compromised. So thank you again for your questions. Thank you.
Questions? Charlie? Yeah, I have a question. It's a little bit abstract, but maybe it's I don't know. One of the things I find interesting is the concept of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Like people always use the word, they very casually use the word, oh, I understand that, or I don't understand that. And when they use that word, the people they're communicating with seem to have a very clear understanding of what that means. Okay?
They have a very tacit understanding of what it means.
But everyone has for example, when I was an undergraduate, I took a probability class, and when I got an A in the class. But I told everybody, yeah, I got an A, but I didn't understand it. Okay, so I don't feel like we have a definition for that word. Is it possible to sort of quantify that?
No, so yeah, so there
I
are
mean, we're
there are two ways of
making
answering it.
formal-
First is that I hope I didn't give anybody the impression that I'm in the camp of AI is not possible. My entire graduate school days were reading books by famed theoretical physicists saying AI is not possible. And then apparently theoretical physics is a very easy domain or something, so then now they started writing things saying not only is it possible, it's going to kill us all. Okay, there is no in between. You know, there is this old saying that Oscar Wilde said that America is the only country that went from barbarism to decadence without touching civilization. Okay, I'm in Purdue, so I can say we're far away from DC. It's almost as if AI went from completely useless to complete killer technology without touching beneficial in the middle. If you look at, people. So I'm not in the habit. I'm not talking about this mythical concept called understanding. It's a question of are you able to find bugs in suggestions that people are making to you. They could be. It's not complete theories. It is. I have this soundbite in one of the things that not having complete theory does not mean not having any theory. In many cases, so I don't know at all how cars work. I was a mechanical engineering student, not in Purdue obviously, but I did at some point of time. But I still don't know how cars work. And yet, when my car doesn't start, you don't see me repainting the car. The guy who is repainting the car so that the car starts is even worse than me, because they don't even have partial causal models of how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we say we don't know something, we still know a huge amount, and that's what winds up helping. And so to me, that's very useful in essentially debugging, whether or not you have a sense of what you're doing. And by the way, this issue of, one of the things that's fascinating to me in the era of GAMS is, those of you who have kids, one of the vivid memories, and I'm sorry to bring up my kids so many times, actually, it's not a kid anymore, but they go through this phase where they completely think syntax is semantics. I have this vivid memory of this one time where my son figured out that he knows how to talk on phone. And we had basically a cordless phone. And so he saw me always talking on the phone while walking. And so one day when his mother, when he was 2 years old, when his mother was in India,